Hi, I'm Jazmín Delgado, and I'm the program coordinator for our Center for Political Education, and this is CPE Study Hall. Through CPE Study Hall, Center for Political Education talks with authors of materials we think can make our struggles more powerful, and we talk about how these materials can be put to use by organizers and activists. And I'm here with Demetrius Johnson and Nicolás Cruz, members of the Red Nation, an organization dedicated to the liberation of Native peoples from capitalism and colonialism. And they are here to talk about the Red Deal, a political platform developed by the Red Nation that lays out some key organizing principles and demands for climate justice and grassroots reform and revolution. Demetrius and Nicolás, welcome to CPE Study Hall. And Nicolás, I'm going to start with you. To those in the audience who might not know much about the work of the Red Nation or this document you've all developed, can you tell us, what is the Red Deal and how did the idea for this document come about and what is its purpose?
Yeah, for sure. Also, thanks for having us. So the Red Deal is, I think we describe it as a platform. It's also kind of a vision, right? It's not just about policy, but rather is really us trying to put forward a vision of what we want to fight towards, right? In terms of responding to the climate crisis, as well as kind of a lot of interrelated issues beyond just, climate change. But and it's in three parts. So we have end the occupation, heal our bodies, and heal our planet. And so we released it in three parts. And it came out, let's see, it came out I want to say December of 2019, maybe Demetrius, yeah, if that sounds right. And it's kind of, people often ask about the Green New Deal and how it relates to the Red Deal. First, we say, it's not the Red New Deal, it's just the Red Deal because it's the same old deal, right? Honor the treaties. The deal that the United States has made with indigenous people has never been upheld, has always been, one of distrust and violence and genocide, right? So it's still the old Red Deal. It came out in response to the Green New Deal in the sense that it tries to go beyond what the Green New Deal aims to do, which is mostly focused on policy, is mostly focused on, curbing CO2 emissions. But we really want to get at the other kind of components of climate injustice, right? And that goes from that the U.S. military is one of the biggest polluters in the world. That incarceration and policing is used to prevent people from fighting for healthy water and air, clean air, and healthy food, right? So we're kind of tackling all these things as interrelated. And the Red Deal kind of puts forward this vision and kind of like steps that we can take to get there. We often say that the Green New Deal was inspired by indigenous struggle, right? Some of the authors like AOC, who's just reelected, she was actually a water protector at Standing Rock, and she decided to run for Congress while at Standing Rock. And so the Green New Deal, which came out soon after her experience there, is kind of an expression of that struggle, as a continuation of that struggle. And then also, we're pretty inspired by the the divest and reinvest movement, both in apartheid through fossil fuel divestment, as well as more recently the Movement for Black Lives document, which was put out a few years ago. Actually, I think it's been several years now. But so we've really been inspired by that work to kind of transition or take money away from things that we don't want to have and put it into what we do want to have.
Great, thank you. And Demetrius, I'll turn over to you. Can you tell us, who is this document for? Who did the Red Nation have in mind, as you were writing this document? And what are your hopes, for how these groups of people will put the document to use?
Yeah, so when we first started writing the document, it was towards the end of 2018. I'm not too sure if Nicolás said December 2018.
I might have been wrong. I said 19, but
okay. The end of 2018 is when we started brainstorming about what we needed to do, more in response to the Green New Deal that was kind of gaining momentum at the time. And I think Indigenous Environmental Network did a pretty good analysis of like the Green New Deal and like how it still leaves out Indigenous folks. And so like out of that kind of like framework is where the Red Nation started, I guess, just brainstorming, honestly. And then we started having meetings and talking about, okay, so what is the Green New Deal? And like what are some movements and I guess like what is like the vision of like this thing that we want to push? We didn't even know it was gonna be called the Red Deal. But in those brainstorming sessions, what we wanted was to have a toolkit, because what we want to build is like mass solidarity, mass movements. And like that's one of our key principles is mass movements can do what mass movements can do what politicians can't do. But also like writing it in the framework of anyone can pick this up, anyone can pick up the Red Deal, anyone can read it and understand like, okay, well, in order for us as humans and also as relatives to the earth and other non-human relatives, that capitalism and colonialism must die in order for us to live. And how do we say that in ways that are concrete, not just for like Indigenous people to read, but also non-Indigenous people to read, because in order to like defeat capitalism and colonialism, we need everyone on board. So understanding that, but also like putting Indigenous struggles in the forefront, that was like the vision of the Red Deal. But more importantly, like I think what we wanted the Red Deal to be was very inspirational, because you can always be against something, right? You can always be against capitalism, you can always be against colonialism, you can always be against imperialism, but at the end of the day, like, what are you for though? And that's something that the Red Deal really focuses on too.
Oh wait, you're muted, Jazmín.
Yeah,
also,
is there anything you would like to add to that, Nicolás?
Yeah, so just in terms of the audience, I think that's important because a lot of times people see the Red Deal and read it as a list of demands, and I think a lot of other platforms that are put out are kind of these demands that we make of those in power, right? And so one of the things in the Red Deal that we say is that this is not a deal with politicians or those in power, but rather with the people of the earth, right? It's a deal saying, we will support each other as we fight for these things that we believe in, like healthcare, like education, housing for everybody, Indigenous foods, all those kind of things. And so our audience really is other people, other organizations. Any like Dee said, anybody could pick up this and say, I'm gonna work in my community to build, community patrols or to make, to do like cop watch, all these kind of things that we talk about in the Red Deal. Someone could do. And so that's who our audience is, rather than like, who the Green New Deal is addressing, which is Congress people, as well as like industries that they're hoping to convince to, pollute less.
Thank you. That's really helpful. And as you mentioned, Nicolás, earlier on, is that the Red Deal document came out in 3 parts, right? And the occupation, Heal Our Bodies, and then Heal Our Planet. And I was wondering if either of you could share a few words about what each of these parts does and why you chose them that way.
I think Dee might be better answering this. I can start this and Nicolás can back me up. But a lot of like what we say, I'm pretty sure like everyone's heard it before, but we say like whatever happens to the land happens to our bodies. And those are more so like, I guess all of them are all 3 of those points are intertwined in that, but heal our bodies and heal the planet, those are more like explicit. But with the first point being like one thing like going into like doing the research for the Red Deal is because like for me personally, like I wasn't aware of like every issue that we brought up, or like I wasn't super aware of like everything happening within like specifically like imperialism or incarceration, and knowing that the U.S. military is like the #1 polluter of the world, and understanding like, okay, well, if we're investing as like the U.S. like so much resources into militarization and imperialism all over the world, what does it look like when we even take like half our budget, half of the budget that we invest into the military? Like, what does that look like when we distribute it to things like healthcare or transportation or like land restoration? But even then, like even if we do cut down like half of like the military budget, we'll still be like we will still invest more into our military than all of the world. We'd be like twice as much as China puts into their military, which is like the second leading military force in the world. But yeah, that's, I don't know if you want to add anything else, Nicolás.
Yeah, I can give some examples of so each of the 3 parts has what we called areas of struggle. So for example, in End the Occupation, we have defunding police, which has become a pretty widespread call in the wake of the uprisings from Minneapolis and all over. End border town violence, right, which is specifically about the towns surrounding indigenous communities and reservations where they're sites of extreme white violence, both from private settlers as well as the police. So we talked about that. Abolishing incarceration, prisons, juvenile detention centers, jails, and border security. Abolish imperial borders, and ending U.S. occupation. That was another big part. Is the U.S. has military bases all over the world and uses those to dominate. And then for the other ones, we have stuff like for Heal Our Bodies, we have free education for everyone, healthcare, public transportation, housing, clean air and water, as well as addressing missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls and Two-Spirit folks, reproductive justice, and then Heal Our Planet is more about the ecological stuff that we're trying to address, like sustainable energy, kind of a revitalization of traditional agriculture, as well as I think another really important part is like Dee was saying, it's not just human centric, right? It's also other species. Like, how do we caretake the planet in a way that doesn't just center human needs and desires? And that's in there as well.
Thank you so much for that. Super comprehensive. And then this question is for both of you to answer. So, for each of you, what would you say is your favorite part of the Red Deal, or like a part that you think is particularly useful for organizers? So I'll start with Demetrius.
I think there's quite a bit, but me kind of being like one of like the authors of the Red Deal and being a part of like many of the working groups, I'll name 2 things if that's okay. One of them is that it's this document, and a lot of like the documents that do come out of the Red Nation are written by like Indigenous femmes or non-binary or non-gender conforming people. And I think that's super important, especially like in the age of like patriarchy, not even just like talking about like the US, but even like within our local communities too, as Indigenous people. But the other thing too is seeing like, so when we launched kind of like this Red Deal campaign back in 2019, one of our first places that we launched was in Farmington, New Mexico, and it's near the Four Corners area. But it's a notorious border town. It really profits off like Navajo and Apache people. It's a huge fracking town. Like that's the only reason why that that town exists is because from all the oil and fracking money that gets poured into it, and also indigenous people's money. But there hasn't really been like a huge, I guess, like native presence, even though it is surrounded by native communities. There's not really like a force or like a native power or presence there, not, at least not since the AIM days. But when we launched the Red Deal and invited community members in Farmington, after we, you know, we came in and had like our working group, people were riled up, people were empowered, people were inspired, and they wanted to take the streets. So we let that happen, and we took the streets of Farmington. We marched down Main Street, talking about everything that we talked about in the Red Deal and like how it relates to that community. And that was the first time in decades that's ever happened. And to be a part of that, and to just know that even like local communities can pick up this document for one day, like even like a couple hours, and understand like, yo, like this totally relates to my community, and I'm ready to ride with it. I think that's like my favorite thing about the Red Deal is just seeing like how powerful something like this can be, especially like when you're in those organizing and planning groups. You don't really know like if this work's important, or like how it's going to reach people, or even if it's going to be as dope as you think it's going to be. And then you present it, and people just get like so inspired. I don't know, that's my favorite part of the Red Deal.
Thank you, Demetrius. It's so inspiring to hear how communities, you know, have been so receptive to it and taken it up. Nicolás, would you like to share?
Yeah, I think there are certain areas of struggle that I think really speak to me. You know, I've done a bit of work in you know, cross-border solidarity and kind of like against ICE and all that. But I think the part that is really my favorite is the principles, the 4 principles that guide the Red Deal. Dee already mentioned one of them that I really love, which is politicians can't do what only mass movements can do. Because I think there's, especially in the US, there's this belief that like all of our energy must go into, you know, electoral politics, because we need to get the right person in the position, and then they can do what we want them to do once they're there. And so I think that one is very important to remind ourselves that, you know, every gain that we've ever made has come from mass movements. It hasn't come from politicians. They might have had some role in being pressured, but it wasn't like their, you know, their idea or their impetus. But I think the one that really is my favorite is what creates crisis cannot solve it. And I think that's directly, you know, in response to climate change, right? That like no green capitalism, no, you know, cap and trade, all those kind of false solutions that they provide of like, you know, this is the way that we're gonna make money off of climate change. Like none of those are gonna solve the problem. I think the you know, political system that we have in the United States is not going to solve the problem, right? Because they're funded by the fossil fuel corporations. They you know, fund the police, like all these kind of things. They're not going to solve it. And I think, you know, pretty clear in the end of our introduction, we say, you know, the choice is between decolonization or extinction. And I think that part right there is really important to me. That we want people to make that choice with us. That, you know, we should be fighting for decolonization rather than allowing things to continue and you know, cause mass extinction.
Thank you so much for sharing, both of you. And, you know, we at the Center for Political Education really, you know, believe that our movements are the strongest, you know, when they're grounded in historical knowledge, strong theory, and rigorous analysis. And I think that's something that we share, you know, with you all in terms of how much you value political education and this dialectic between study and struggle. And so I wanted to ask each of you, you know, are there any materials, this can be like a podcast episode, a podcast series, a book, film, any kind of material at all that would be a good companion or a supplement to this piece? And I'd love to hear from each of you.
Yeah, I was just, before this call, I was looking that we have a podcast episode about the Red Deal. So it might cover similar things to what we're talking about now, but I think we'll get into a little more detail of like the writing process. But it's the very first episode of our Red Power Hour podcast series. So if you go to our Libsyn Red Nation podcast, you can find it there. I think also, you know, Nick Essis's book, Our History is the Future, which I read recently, and I think talks a lot about the historical development of both indigenous struggle, but also, like, you know, one of the things I didn't know before reading it was how many dams have been constructed in the Midwest region and in the Great Plains, and how they have flooded entire nations to build these dams. And a lot of that was part of the New Deal, right? The original New Deal. And so I think that history is really important, because if we don't know that history, that like the United States has made the New Deal at the expense of indigenous peoples, then if we don't know that, we'll continue to do a Green New Deal, which again is at the expense of indigenous people and ignores indigenous struggles. So I think that knowing that history is really important. So I think his book is really good at doing that. But yeah, that's all I can think about right now.
Thank you, Nicolás. Demetrius?
I have two that I have two, we'll say three. The first one was actually the People's Agreement on Cochabamba, which was written at the People's Conference on Climate Change. But this was a document made back in 2010, and I wasn't made aware of it until last month, I believe. But that's also like people are talking about it now, like on the international level, as something that they want to adopt, and it really falls in line with what the Red Deal is. I guess, like, since it's first, I would give it that credit, but also like it's a very important document written by indigenous peoples from the South in relation to like how we're going to protect Mother Earth. And I would recommend reading that because it really falls in line with like what the Red Deal is. The second one I want to recommend is, oh my gosh, I just had it and I forgot it. No, oh no, what was it? Wow.
What was it about?
What was it?
What was it about? Or like,
oh, you know what? I forgot it. What the heck? I just had it in my brain. I'm sorry. But if it's possible, I'll just give you the link because I just had it. But the third one that was going to be an option, but not really an option, but is also kind of an option. I would honestly recommend like watching movies, because like the whole thing about, at least for me, this is my opinion, but I think the whole thing about the Red Deal is like, it's supposed to inspire you. Like, how are we supposed to have like a movement? How are we going to generate people? Like, if there's like no inspiration in it, right? So I would like to say like people like really watch, I guess, like movies or just like some like depictions, like such like Star Wars, for instance, or like Lord of the Rings, where it's just like people coming together and like toppling a power that might be like insurmountable, but they do it anyways. And that's sometimes the way I think about, at least like when I get like all depressed boy or sad boy, like, you know, those things like really help, you know, those moments, even though they might be fictional or whatever, like, you know, sometimes you just got to be reminded like why we play this game. But I really wish I remembered the second option or the second recommendation. Oh, I remembered it. There's this document that, or it's more of like a statement of solidarity, but it brings up really good points. It was written by the Palestinian Youth Movement. It's called Oil is the New Lithium. And that was talking about Bolivia and how Elon Musk was trying to, like, it was like after the coup, right, of Evo Morales. But I would recommend that. Shout out to our boy Evo Morales, but that was my other recommendation.
Thank you so much for lifting up all those suggestions. Those are really, yeah, great recommendations for continued study. And, and I do think I would also agree with, Demetrius, that reading the Red Deal is kind of like reading this, kind of saga. It's world making. It's a world making project, and it's really inspirational and visionary. So, we at Center for Political Education really encourage everybody to read all 3 parts of the Red Deal, to study, to talk about it with your comrades, community members, and lastly, put it to use. There are some very concrete recommendations for how people can take it up and apply it in their local context. So just really want to lift that up. And where can people access this document?
On our website, so therednation.org. All 3 parts are on there. In fact, I think it's on the main page. If you scroll down, there's like a Red Deal section. We'll also be turning into a book through our Red Media, which is like a new project of the Red Nation or related to the Red Nation. But yeah, so we'll be writing into a full book, and that I think won't come out until like April of next year. But folks should look for that.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. Thank you, Demetrius and Nicolás. Thank you for joining us. Keep us posted on the release of the new iteration of the Red Deal. But in the meantime, we encourage people to go to your website, check it out, and really keep up the amazing work with the Red Nation. We're grateful to be in the struggle with you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.